This is the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature. We're here with Dr. Rupy. He's the author of the Doctor's Kitchen series of books, and he's with us now. Dr. Rupy, good to have you with us. Thanks so much indeed.
Good to be here. It's a pleasure.
So talk us through the basic thesis for writing these books, the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah. So I guess the problem is poor understanding and education around what we should be eating. It's something that I come across every day in my clinical practice. And really, I'm just trying to motivate everyone to understand what the benefits of food are and how they can make it pleasurable and indulgent and something that they can practically do every day.
Okay, so what are we doing wrong and how do we fix it?
Yeah, so what we're doing wrong is we don't understand the problem, first of all. So we don't understand why poor food has an impact on our diet, on our well-being. The other thing is we don't know what to eat as well. And I think there's lots of miscommunication, particularly now with social media, about what we should be eating and all these different tribes around food. But it really comes down to some core principles. It's mainly plants, lots of color, focusing on fiber, eating quality fats, and eating in time as well. So that's really about when we eat rather than just what we're eating as well.
Okay, so there are heroes and villains in this story in your books, Dr. Rupy, aren't there? Can we start with the villains of the piece first of all?
Sure.
The things we shouldn't be eating that we are eating.
Yeah, so I think it's certainly become a lot better recognized that we have way too much sugar in our dietary system. And this is from everything from convenience foods, processed items, even simple drinks as well. You know, sugar is really built into the formulation of lots of foods that we have access to. So knocking sugar on the head, I think, is one thing that we need to focus on. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to remove every ounce of sugar from our diets completely, because I think it all comes down to balance. And I still put sugar in some of my recipes because you need to balance the flavors and the bitterness and, you know, make sure that the meal still comes together quite nicely. So it really comes down to the dose of the sugar that we're using, as well as the quality of all the other ingredients as well. So sugar is definitely one element. Another is poor quality fats. So we've demonized all sorts of fats for the last 40, 50 years, where in reality, it's certain types of fats, fried foods, poor quality oils, refined fats as well that have been far removed from exactly what their initial constituents were. Whereas if we look at quality fats, things like nuts and seeds, looking at cold pressed oils, things that have been mechanically pressed, they have a lot of nutritional attributes that we should be putting into our diet because they're anti-inflammatory, a lot of them contain good fiber sources, and they're mineral and vitamin rich sources of nutrition.
Okay, so how are you qualified, Dr. Rupy, to talk to us about this? You are a doctor of medicine. You are absolutely qualified to talk to me about many, many elements of my well-being, and I completely get that. But you're not a chef.
So I think with the element of medicine, what it gives me is analytical tools. So I can read research papers and I can distill, what actually works for certain people and where we need to be moving towards as well. The other thing is, you're right, as a medical doctor, we're not taught any nutrition during medical school.
Are you not?
No, this is a very common issue that we find in lots of different medical schools around the world. So on average, we're about 5 hours of nutrition in the context of a 5-year degree.
No way.
And a lot of that is actually not very practical either. So it's not you coming into clinic and me giving you some practical advice about how to change your behavior and perhaps optimize your diet slightly. It's more about vitamin deficiencies that we rarely see, or total parenteral nutrition, which is basically where we give feeds through drips for very, very sick patients in hospital. So not the day-to-day sort of nutrition that we should really be learning about. We're trying to change that with Culinary Medicine, which is a non-profit that I started a few years ago.
Culinary Medicine?
Yeah, so we're teaching medical students not just about the foundations of nutrition, but also how to cook as well. And we're starting this conversation between medical students, professional chefs, and dietitians as well. So it's that trifecta that will allow a new generation of doctors to really understand how to use nutrition in a practical sense, and in a holistic sense as part of another clinical tool in our toolkit against disease. So lots of different ways in which we. But to your point about, yes, I'm not a chef, so I'm a home cook. I don't regard myself as a chef. Being a chef is a very different set of skills that I think one has to learn through pure experience in kitchens. I don't have any of that. But what I do have an understanding of is flavor and mixing different ingredients and the practical elements of making cooking well every day easy through just conversations that I've had with patients. And then I'm finishing up a master's in nutritional medicine as well. So that's given me a little bit more gravitas from the nutrition side of things.
Okay, yeah, a master's in nutrition would do it, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the book. You're here for the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature here in Dubai. 2015, I think, the first Doctor's Kitchen book came out. There's now a series of them. What was the inspiration from that? Talk to me about the journey, because even though the book came out 2015, I'm sure it started well before that.
Yeah. So the inspiration for my sort of healthy eating journey came from my own personal health issues. So back in 2009, when I first qualified as a junior doctor, I started suffering from something called atrial fibrillation, which is where your heart beats exceptionally fast and irregularly. So
I have that as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. Here we go. We're heart bros.
So you'll understand, like you can just flip into an episode and it can last anywhere between 12, 36 hours. I mean, everyone's experience of AF is slightly different. For me, I had no triggers. It was sometimes when I was just working in A&E, I would just flip into this heart rhythm and I'd have to be admitted. And it would occur 2 to 3 times a week as well. And this would go on for months and months. So I went through every different avenue you can imagine. I saw different cardiologists, physiologists, had all the investigations. I had physiology studies where they look at inside the heart and look at what could be going wrong. I was given medications and I was going to have something called an ablation, which is where you put a guide wire into the heart and burn an area on the pulmonary vein to stop these misfiring cells. But it was actually my mum, who's not a medic, who said to me, you should really think about your diet and lifestyle and optimize that before you have something as drastic as this intervention. And, you know, as a conventionally trained doctor, I thought she was off a rocker. I didn't really, think about diet and lifestyle as having any meaningful impact on something that was quite severe as a heart condition. And so really to appease her, I started trying to change up my diet bit by bit. Out went cereals in the morning, in came leftovers with some nuts and seeds. Out went the soggy sandwiches at the hospital canteen. In came me preparing food and putting it in Tupperwares and, having a lot more greens in my diet, trying to optimize more towards a plant-based, holistic way of eating from my initial research about what I should be eating. And over time, my AF episodes reverted to the point now where I'm in complete remission. I still see my cardiologist, I still have my investigations, but I do not have atrial fibrillation anymore. And so that was really the spark for me to think about nutrition as a tool, to really do a lot more research in this and start talking to people about it. And so I would change up my clinical consults to talk a bit more about food and personalize it to them and their circumstances. So a type 2 diabetes patient, a heart patient, someone with high cholesterol, someone who has blood pressure issues. Are there any things that we can do with nutrition as well as pharmaceuticals? And it turns out there's a lot we can do, and that was the starting point for the books.
I mean, you're a slim, fit guy now. Were you a slim, fit guy back in 2009 as well?
Yeah, I was actually. It's really people think that I might have had this like drastic transition. In all honesty, I don't think I've changed that much. However, my stress levels were super high back then. I certainly wasn't optimizing sleep. Meditation definitely had an impact on me as well. And then the quality of the diet I was eating, I could probably get away with as a 24-year-old and still maintain some semblance of like how I am now, but certainly not for a lot of other people. And right now, if I was eating that sort of way in that stress state and with that stress sort of lifestyle, I probably wouldn't be able to maintain a healthy weight either. So there's lots of different reasons and drivers as to why someone might be overweight. but I think it was down to the quality of my diet that really helped.
Well, diet is interesting. We're speaking in Dubai now. You're from the United Kingdom. I am as well. But you're of Indian heritage. Your family's from Punjab. My family's from Maharashtra as well. And different cultures have different diets. If you look at the diet that you were eating at the time or that you grew up with, what were some of the red flags, but also what were some of the things that actually worked really, really well?
Yeah.
And that you took from that and thought, yeah, this is the kind of stuff that we can build on. It's tasty and it's nutritious and we can eat this, whether it's a Western diet or an Asian diet, whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were just doing a session here at the Literary Festival on creative interpretations of one's diet. And I think the first thing to note is that we have to be quite respectful of traditions and cuisines, and if you're going to be calling something a tiramisu, it has to have some semblance of that. And personalizing someone's taste preferences for food, something that we derive so much pleasure from, and something that we've evolved from an evolutionary perspective to really love. We want to bear that in mind whenever I'm giving like some dietary suggestions. And so for me, coming from an Indian background, I love dals, I love curries, I love all those beautiful spice mixes. But in a lot of cases, we have too much of what is giving the flavor and the maybe not benefits, but certainly the pleasurable aspects of food. And so for a tarka, for example, or like a saag, it's usually laden with lots of cream and ghee and all these different elements that are delicious, but perhaps in too high a quantity. And we have that too often as well. And so really it's about dialing down some of the elements of it, maintaining the flavor and the structure, the semblance of the food, and also combining with other things that are just as flavorful too. So for me, it would be a case of like making sure that I stuck to the principles of healthy eating. Whole foods, largely unprocessed, lots of colors, diversity, fiber, and also eating in time. So trying to fit that into my day-to-day was key, and actually something that I've learned along the way from speaking to patients and learning about what the drivers and what the obstacles are for people to lead a healthier lifestyle.
But how do we do no one could disagree with what you're saying. Okay, yeah. I get it. And yeah, at the end of a busy day, we come home, my kids are hungry, I'm hungry, and you use a food delivery app. Yeah. Because they'll bring you the food, and it's probably not the kind of food that you describe. So how did you, as a busy working doctor, and the hours you were working, probably more than most of us, how did you manage to prepare this healthy food? Yeah. Working, what were you, 60, 70 hours a week?
Oh, yeah, probably something like that. And odd hours as well. Yeah. I hear you. I think it's definitely, everyone has their own obstacles. Everyone has their own barriers to healthy eating, whether it's family, whether it's time, whether it's the inability to cook, all these different things. So I had a few things on my side. So I was able to cook. It's something that I've loved doing throughout medical school. So I had that culinary confidence to actually prepare something from scratch for myself, but the time issue was a big thing. And so I worked out a few hacks along the way where I could master a few healthy meals that I could cook in bulk, that I could keep for the week. Certain freezer items are absolutely really healthy.
Such as?
So peas, mixed vegetables, sweet corn, those are actually really wholesome ingredients because they're frozen at source. So the nutrient value is actually locked in. And in some cases, they actually have more nutrition than fresh because they've had less handling. They've been exposed to different temperatures along the way. That can actually degrade the nutrient quality of fresh ingredients. So in some cases, frozen is actually better. And so learning about all this stuff, I was able to put meals together in no time whatsoever. So if anyone's watching or listening to this, one thing I always tell people to do is master one healthy meal, something that you can do with your eyes closed, and it takes less than 10 minutes, and it uses largely store-cupboard items, and it can be a jar of passata, chopped tomatoes, canned chickpeas or jarred beans, something that you have from your freezer, as well as using a ready-made paste that you've either made yourself or you've bought and you've looked out for a low-sugar variety. those little hacks really do add up cumulatively to make sure that you're getting your veg quota in every single day, and it's not going to be too stressful either. And then I hear you every now and then, I'll use a delivery app and I'll indulge, or I just don't have time. You've got to be quite forgiving to yourself as well, and just make sure that the next time you go back to basics and you just try again, and that's it. It's this kaizen, this constant improvement, that Japanese description for constantly improving in one single direction. Sometimes you have up and downs, but you're trending in the right direction.
I was looking on your website today. Recipes look lovely. Not a lot of meat in there. bit of fish, not a lot of meat.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
So when you look at population studies, observational data, all the research that points towards the healthiest, longest living people, they have a plant-focused diet. And there's no way of dressing it up. I wish, I could say to everyone, you can eat as much meat as you want. But the reality is, certainly in our environment, in developed countries and urbanized environments in particular, we have too much meat. And we have to really re-establish a relationship with eating a lot more plants in our diet and a lot more diversity, because where we actually do lack is certainly not protein, even for vegetarians and vegans, it's actually fiber. And where we got fiber is from plants. And so we need to really focus on getting a lot more experimental with different types of plants, because they are wonderful ingredients that taste incredible, and we can develop a taste affinity to them as well. So that's probably why not all my recipes have meat in, and they're largely plants, but I still have some meat recipes as well.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So it's not about eliminating anything in particular.
No, it's not. I call myself dietary agnostic. Like, if you want to be paleo, be paleo. If you want to be vegan. But when you look at the elements of all those different diets, they have a lot of similarities. 80% of it is the same thing that I'm talking about. It's largely plants, lots of diversity. They do have some fibers in. At the extremes, you have like fruitarians, which are just eating fruits, and then you have carnivores that just want to eat meat. And I see the therapeutic benefits for a very slim minority of people for certain diets, but most of us just need to focus on the principles, and that is largely plant-based.
Let's talk about your career as an author. So we've got the backstory on how you got to 2015 and writing the first book. That was 2015. We're chatting in 2022 in Dubai, and you've just taken a sabbatical from your medical career, and you've trained for, 15, 20 years to be a doctor, to focus on the books, but not just the books, the podcast, the social media, the TV series, and so on. Explain that career journey as an author, but also the spin-off elements of being an author.
Yeah, it's weird. So I started The Doctor's Kitchen in 2015. The first book didn't come out until 2017. And so the book side of my career has been like 4 or 5 years now, which has been super exciting, and I think pretty pivotal to everything else that I do. And I've been learning a lot more about business and this flywheel effect. If you want to have true influence.
That sounds very Jim Collins.
Yeah.
Good to great.
You wanna have like different touch points for different people if you truly want to have an impact and influence in this world. So social media was the first point of call. When I started, it was very early days, I guess, for Instagram. People were just joining. And I thought that was a really easy way to make simple changes to people's lives. I never anticipated writing a book. I never anticipated doing podcasts or shows or anything like that. But that was the starting point. I think that's been central to everything else that I do. And then joining other platforms as well, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, obviously. All these different elements. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. People, I think there's like this common misperception that influencers and creators just sit in their bedrooms all day and they just knock out a few pieces of content and get paid millions of dollars. It's such a hard job because there is no downtime. It's a 7-day-a-week job, and you're putting yourself out there a lot, to criticism and everything else.
Do you get the haters?
I get loads. Yeah.
Do you?
I've got loads from not only from random people, but also from my own profession as well. Putting your head above the parapet and starting to talk about a concept that isn't fully recognized even to this day. the therapeutic aspects of food, food as medicine, nutritional medicine. It's pretty cavalier back in 2015. Now I think we're developing an affinity to these terms and also an appreciation for its impact. But 7 years ago, it was definitely not the norm. And even to this day, I still get people saying, oh, I'm a bit of a charlatan or whatever. But you have to let these things wash over, because on the day-to-day basis, when you're having that conversation with someone in front of you, and you know that nutrition has helped and can help, this is what drives you forward. So you have to focus on the positive, and the negative is less than 0.5%, you would say, if you look in the grander scheme of things. But as humans, we latch on to the negative aspects, and that can cloud our judgment. With the podcast, that was really my publishers who suggested that I should start a podcast to promote the first book. And I never wanted to do a podcast. I just thought, there's enough podcasts out there. Why would I want to do another one? So I did a 6-episode series where I brought in some of my friends and we talked about different elements. Why we need to eat more plant-based, what the impact of plant chemicals are and the mechanisms behind that, the impact of fiber on our gut microbiota, what the gut microbiota is, all these different microbes that live in and around our body, largely in our large intestine, the bacteriome, the virome, all these different elements. And it was so popular, and I found a medium that people really leaned into and they enjoyed. And if you think about a podcast, I mean, you know this in your profession as well, people are giving you their time. That is their most valuable resource. So if they are giving their time to listen to you for an hour every week, just an hour every week is hugely, hugely precious. So we found that, we could engage with the community so much more, and I can have a more nuanced conversation that you can't have on a character-limited social media platform. And so podcast has been revolutionary. And now with the app, we just launched a couple of weeks ago. I knew that was like 2.5 years in the making, research. Tech is another world in itself. I'm learning about glitches and bugs and customer support and, route to market.
Because you're generating revenue from the app, aren't you?
Yeah. This is the first time that I wholly own every element of it. Not much revenue, and there's been a lot of research to get to this point as well. We've got a long way before we actually reach a break-even point, because the app is very different to your typical recipe app. So right now, our MVP, if you like, is a recipe.
MVP, minimum viable product?
Yeah, minimum viable product, which is basically our route to entry, a very simplified product that hasn't got the bells and whistles on, but it's something to launch with, to learn from as well. And our users are really teaching us everything. We want this, we want shopping lists, we want meal planning, we want all these different elements, which is great. We just need to prioritize what we can feasibly build, and also what's going to have the best impact on people's health ultimately, and usability as well. So the app is it's a recipe app, but you can filter according to health goals. We have 5 health goals at the moment: brain health, mental health, inflammation, heart health, general well-being. And what we've done is, with our research team, we've gone through all the literature and looked at ingredients and dietary patterns that align all those different health goals. You can then filter according to allergens as well as your dietary preferences, and that gives you your library of recipes that are evidence-based and personalized to you. That's a very simplistic way of describing what is quite a complicated and costly process to create these recipes.
But the books are the core of it.
Yeah.
It's the Festival of Literature. There's the apps, there's the podcast.
Yeah.
But the books are still core.
Yeah.
The physical book, and there's 3 now, aren't there?
Yeah.
They're still important, do you think?
Absolutely. It's so funny because, you'd think at this point, particularly when we have iPads, computers, powerful computers in our pockets, that books may have fallen to the wayside. But as a foodie myself, and as someone who loves reading, there's nothing that really replaces the analog feel of flicking through pages, or the feel of a book when you're on holiday, or when you're cooking and you've got one of those cookbook holders and you flick the pages and you splatter some tomato sauce and stuff, and it looks well thumbed and used. That's the beauty of books, and it's impossible to replace with an app or anything like that. what the app does give you is that element of personalization, and what we can add is like loads of photography and lots of like step-by-step images and things that are limited with the cookbook, but I don't think it's a replacement for it, no.
Right, we're nearly done. Dr. Rupy, going to let you go. Couple of final questions. You talked about the 3 or 4 vegetables we need in our freezer all the time.
Yeah.
Peas, corn.
Mixed vegetables, sweet corn, yeah.
What are the 3 or 4 things we need in our cupboard very quickly?
Okay, so...
Or fridge.
Yeah, jarred vegetables I think are really good. So jarred peas and beans and chickpeas, those are fantastic because they form the base of our meals. Pastes, really important. Different curry pastes, a store-bought pesto, that sort of thing. So you can quickly make flavorful meals. And making sure you've got a well-stocked spice cupboard that you replenish every couple of months or so, because...
Oh, you're a Punjabi. So
yeah,
you've got some ideas on this.
You've got to have coriander seeds, fennel seeds. Always go for seeds and grind them, because that way you're locking in a lot of the nutrition. You're not exposing the outside of the seed to oxygen, which oxidizes it, and it tastes so much better as well.
Finally, cheat day.
Cheat day.
Cheat day for Dr. Rupy. What's on the menu?
Cheat day for me, surprisingly for a lot of people, is fried chicken. I love fried chicken, and there's a version of fried chicken with za'atar that goes so well. The combination is amazing. And I know this is cheat day, I always have to have vegetables. I love tender stem broccoli, greens. I have to have that on the side of my meal always, because I just have an affinity to it and I genuinely indulge in it.
Dr. Rupy Ojla, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much indeed for your time.
My pleasure.
Great to have you here at the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature. That is Dr. Rupy Ojla talking about his series of books, The Doctor's Kitchen.